The message came late, glowing on Emma Carter's phone while rain tapped the window and the city rested, and she almost ignored it because some names pull old air back into your lungs, but the name Daniel Harper stopped her thumb, her ex-husband's son, a name tied to a life she had carefully folded away, and the message was short and polite, asking for advice, nothing dramatic, nothing urgent, yet it carried a quiet weight that made her sit up, remembering the boy who used to wait at the kitchen counter pretending not to listen while she talked about work, the young man who once thanked her for being patient when no one else was, and now, years after the divorce, after she learned how to live alone without bitterness, he was reaching out, so she replied with calm words she practiced daily, asking what he needed, and his answer came fast, asking to meet in person, which made her pause because meeting meant reopening a door she had closed without slamming, a door filled with shared dinners, soft arguments, and a goodbye that tried to be kind, but curiosity won over caution, and they chose a small cafe near the river where people went to think, not to impress, and Emma arrived early, scanning the room, telling herself she was steady, that she could handle one conversation, yet when Daniel walked in she felt time slip, because he was no longer the unsure teenager she remembered, he carried himself with calm, his face more defined, his eyes serious, and when he smiled it was warm but careful, as if he understood the moment mattered, and they sat, exchanged polite words, and the pace of the world seemed to move faster outside while theirs slowed, Daniel speaking openly about life choices, about feeling lost between who he was and who others expected him to be, about relationships that felt shallow, and Emma listened, answering with honest, simple advice, telling him that uncertainty was not failure, that pressure fades when you choose your own path, and as she spoke, she noticed how closely he listened, not as a child looking for approval, but as an adult seeking truth, and when he admitted that her leaving years ago had left a space he never understood, the words landed softly but stayed, and Emma felt a mix of guilt and surprise because she had never known she mattered that way, and though she kept her voice calm she felt something shift, an awareness that this meeting was not random, that it carried unfinished emotion, and when Daniel thanked her, saying her words made him feel seen again, Emma realized advice was only the reason, not the purpose, and as they stood to leave, neither rushed, the air between them holding a quiet tension that was not spoken, and walking out together under the gray sky, Emma knew this was not just a conversation remembered and forgotten, it was a beginning she had not planned, and as Daniel asked if they could talk again sometime, she said yes without thinking, unaware that this simple answer would change the careful balance she had built, because some moments arrive softly, without warning, and by the time you understand them, they are already moving your life forward. Daniel and Emma met again a few days later at the same cafe, the air between them carrying a quiet tension that neither ignored, and this time, Daniel seemed more certain, his voice steady though his eyes betrayed a nervousness he tried to hide, and he began by saying he needed advice not just about life, but about decisions that felt heavier than he could carry alone, about choosing paths that aligned with his heart instead of what others expected, and Emma listened carefully, offering guidance the way she always had, calm, clear, and thoughtful, telling him that mistakes were part of learning, that it was okay to take time, to explore feelings and ambitions without pressure, and as she spoke, she noticed a subtle shift in him, the way he leaned in slightly, the way his gaze lingered longer, the small sighs of relief when her words seemed to unburden him, and then, after they talked about school, work, and friendships, Daniel hesitated, fidgeting with the edge of his cup before saying something that caught Emma off guard, admitting that he had been carrying more than just questions about life, that he had carried emotions he didn't fully understand, that her leaving years ago had left a hole in his life that no one else could fill, and as he spoke, Emma felt a mix of surprise, guilt, and warmth, because she had never realized her presence had mattered to him so deeply, that her kindness and care had left a lasting impression. And when he confessed that he missed her, that he had missed her guidance, her understanding, even her laughter, Emma felt her chest tighten, aware that this was more than a simple conversation about advice, that it was a meeting of hearts trying to reconcile the past with the present, and she chose her words with care, telling him that she had cared for him as family, that his honesty was brave, and that while some doors in life close for reasons beyond control, the connection they shared could still be honored with respect and kindness. And as they stood to leave, the cafe quiet around them, they lingered in that fragile moment, neither stepping away too soon, neither breaking the unspoken bond that had quietly reformed, and as they walked out together into the soft afternoon light, Emma realized she had not only given advice, but had reopened her heart to a presence she thought was gone, feeling the strange mix of hope and hesitation that comes when the past and present meet, knowing that whatever followed would require careful steps, honesty, and patience, because some relationships, even the most unexpected, demand time to understand, to grow, and to reveal the truth beneath the surface. After that first honest conversation, Daniel and Emma started speaking more often, at first carefully, with texts about school, work, and life choices, simple exchanges that were safe but carried an unspoken weight, and soon phone calls became regular, each one stretching longer than the last, filled with laughter, memories, and moments of quiet reflection. And Emma noticed how he remembered details others overlooked, how he listened with patience, how his questions showed curiosity not just about advice but about her life, her thoughts, and her feelings, and slowly, boundaries she had assumed were firm began to blur as emotions crept into every interaction, subtle but undeniable. And one evening they walked together along the river, the city lights reflecting on the water, conversation flowing easily until Daniel paused, looking at her with a seriousness that made her heart catch, and he admitted that pretending he didn't feel a certain way was becoming impossible, that his respect for her, his care, and something deeper, something that had grown quietly over time, were real. And though Emma reminded herself of the complications, the past, the difference in their ages, and the ties to old family roles, she couldn't deny her own stirring feelings, the warmth that rose when he spoke sincerely, the longing that quietly echoed in her chest, and she realized that this connection wasn't about temptation or impulsive attraction, it was about honesty and emotional resonance, the kind that forms slowly, rooted in trust and shared history. And as they stopped by the water's edge, standing close but not touching, the silence was heavy with unsaid words, a mix of fear, anticipation, and hope, and Daniel said he didn't want to rush or cross lines, only to understand clearly what they both felt, and Emma knew the truth she carried mirrored his, that her heart responded to his presence even when logic warned her to step back, and the realization hit her: life doesn't always follow the rules we expect, and sometimes the people who mean the most appear in ways that challenge everything we thought we knew. So they parted that night with careful restraint, each walking home with thoughts racing, hearts full, and the unspoken promise that this journey, though uncertain, was theirs to explore, slowly, carefully, with honesty as their guide. The turning point came unexpectedly, a quiet afternoon when Daniel and Emma were sharing a coffee and talking about ordinary things, and Daniel revealed he had told his father they had reconnected, not every detail, just enough to acknowledge her presence in his life again, and the reaction had been calm, almost distant, leaving a weight of unspoken disappointment that hung over them, making both realize that pursuing their connection wasn't without consequences. And Daniel admitted he didn't want to hurt anyone, especially Emma, and the honesty in his voice made her heart ache because she understood the careful balance they needed to maintain. So they agreed to take space, to step back and reflect on what their feelings truly meant. And in those weeks apart, Emma focused on herself, rebuilding her routines, her confidence, and her sense of direction, learning that longing doesn't vanish just because you ignore it, but it can be understood, managed, and used to grow. And when Daniel appeared at her door unexpectedly, smiling nervously, she knew something had shifted, that his presence was intentional, that this wasn't about advice anymore. And he told her he had grown, that he was still growing, but what he felt for her was no longer confusion or longing alone, it was respect, care, and sincerity, real emotions he could no longer hide or deny. And Emma studied his face, searching for doubt, but finding none, feeling a rush of emotions she had carefully restrained for weeks. And as they stood there, quiet and aware, she realized that their relationship didn't need grand gestures or reckless declarations to begin meaningfully, that it could start with patience, honesty, and choice, slowly building trust and understanding as they navigated the complexities of their connection. And in that moment, as the door closed softly behind them, Emma understood that life rarely gives perfect timing, that sometimes the gift is the truth itself, raw and unexpected, and it asks you to decide whether you are brave enough to step forward, to embrace what your heart quietly knows. And as they shared that quiet space, the city humming around them, she felt a mix of hope, fear, and anticipation, knowing that the future was uncertain but promising, and that the journey they were about to take together was theirs to shape with honesty, care, and the courage to follow feelings that had quietly grown into something undeniable.